Hey everyone, happy Thursday. I hope you guys are having a great week. And today we have a lot to discuss. We're going to talk about what could happen or what Kamala Harris thinks might happen if she becomes president in terms of the housing market. We also are going to talk about an article from Realtor.com that talks about what experts are predicting could happen with the market as interest rates change and possibly get cut. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about the C word, commissions. So as some of you may know, it's been a lot of the news lately. Real estate commissions are changing. There's some new rules coming into place. So we're going to talk about that as well. But thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of the stream. I'm glad that you're watching. Please drop a like if you are enjoying the stream, and drop in the comments where you're watching from. Obviously, this is all over the world, and I would love to know what real estate market you are in. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into things. And if at any times you guys have questions about anything, drop it in the comments. I'm happy to talk real estate, whether or not you have a question about a house that you're looking at. Maybe you're in a transaction, maybe you're talking to a real estate agent and you just want some guidance and an opinion. I'd be happy to do that. So the very first article we're going to start with is sort of the title of the stream. So Kamala Harris is planning on shaking up the housing market in the United States if she gets elected. So the very first article we're talking about, we want this one instead, is this article from Newsweek. Actually, let's do that. Perfect. Make this a little bit bigger for you guys. There we go. Now we can see. So this first article comes from Newsweek, and you can see the title, Kamala Harris's plans to shake up the housing market. And this just was published yesterday with an update later today. Now, little disclosure, typically I don't get into politics on the channel. Obviously, the housing market is a big, big deal, and it's no doubt going to be an issue that's brought up during the presidential election, which is coming up here just a few months away. So in this sense, we're going to talk about what this candidate's plan is for housing, but that's about the extent of it. So we're not going to get into different pros and cons in terms of what Ms. Harris's presidential bid could lead to in terms of housing market or financials or anything like that. We're just going to talk about this article because as one of the two major candidates, it's quite likely that she could have an effect on the housing market. And quite frankly, like I said, it's on kind of the forefront of most Americans' mind. Unless you've been living under a rock, buying a house is really, really difficult these days. So let's get into this article. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have announced measures to boost the construction of new homes across the U.S. and make them more affordable, including $100 million in community grants to identify and remove barriers to affordable housing production and preservation. And removing barriers, that's a really, really big one. Anybody that's in the housing world and development world will tell you that there is a lot of red tape around developing homes, whether that's just building one home or building attractive homes. Most of the time in a lot of areas, it's really, really difficult to actually get your permits, get everything that's needed to build the home, all the costs, it gets very expensive. There's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy that goes with real estate development. And that only gets worse in the more populated areas. And that's actually been one of the reasons that a lot of people think we're sort of in this housing glut, this supply glut. A lot of it has to do with the fact that developing housing has a lot of limitations because of that red tape. So I'm not surprised to hear that Ms. Harris's sort of one of her things is to remove those barriers. And we've heard other people talk about this. We've heard other housing experts talk about trying to remove some of the barriers. Some states have done that. I am in California, so I'm in Los Angeles County. I'm about 35 miles east of downtown Los Angeles in a town called Claremont, California. And California has passed recently a few pieces of legislation that expedite the building process. Some of those things include what's called builder's remedy. And basically what that does is that gives builders very, very low opposition from local government, assuming their project meets basic building codes. So in our state, in our area here in California, if a builder wants to build something and it meets very, very basic building codes, then they don't have to really get public input. It doesn't need to have any public approval. And in fact, there's a certain number of meetings that the city can even have to discuss the project, which I believe is capped at like 4 or 5. So the city can't just keep having meetings to prolong this development. And part of Kamala Harris's housing plan is to continue with things like this. It's a pro and a con, right? The pro is it'll be easier to build houses, and we need houses. Is the article going to say I believe we're about 1.5 million units short still of having an acceptable inventory level. So that's the pro, is that houses will be easier to build. The con is that it does take away local power, local government power, and local government jurisdiction, because now you could have a developer come into a neighborhood. They could say, hey, we identified a vacant plot, and we want to build 40 condos here. And as long as the zoning is correct, and as long as their plans are up to building code, it's going to happen. So that's kind of the bad part, is that now some local communities feel like things are being shoved down their throats. Of course, like I said, pros and cons to everything. There's good and bad to it. You just have to figure out, how you feel and where you stand on it. The new measures, which include expediting housing permitting and providing greater interest rate predictability for state and local housing finance agencies, are the first major housing policies to be announced since Harris became the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. Newsweek contacted Harris's 2024 campaign for comment by email outside usual working hours. The part that was kind of interesting here is interest rate predictability for state and local housing finance agencies. I'm not exactly sure how, not just Kamala Harris, but I'm not sure how any politician or government entity, federal government, state government entity could really do that. I would like to hear, and hopefully they expand on this a little bit, how they can provide greater interest rate predictability, because really, quite honestly, that's up to the Fed. And the Fed is basing their decision based off of a whole host of economic factors. So it isn't just about what the Fed feels like doing today with interest rates. It really breaks down to what data the Fed is seeing about the economy, GDP, inflation, CPI. I mean, these are all things that we've heard over the last couple of years, because, of course, interest rates are still a very hot button topic with what they have done in the last couple of years and what they've even done in the last couple months, which has been an improvement, but we'll talk about that in the next article. The U.S. housing market could become an important issue in the 2024 election. Gee, you think it could become? I think it's going to be a huge issue. I think housing, inflation, and the economy is really it. I think those are going to be the biggest issues. Obviously, there's always concern with international global political conflict. That never really goes away, unfortunately. But I think that most Americans are really going to care about housing affordability, economic stability, and inflation. I think that's going to be the big stuff. So to say that the U.S. housing market could become an important issue, I think they're downplaying things just a little bit. So the U.S. housing market could become an important issue in the 2024 election, as affordability is near an all-time low in the country, and many are struggling to get on the property ladder. According to Freddie Mac, the country needs at least 1.5 million more homes to relieve the national housing shortage. And yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I don't know how many things I hear. I was on a stream earlier this week with my good friend Jackie Baker, and we were talking about affordability and interest rates. And there were a lot of people in the chat, in the comments, that, hey, I'm a public school teacher. I have a master's degree. I've topped out income for the school district. I'm not even close to buying a house or being able to afford to buy a house. And it's really disheartening, especially, as someone who helps people buy homes. When we don't have the ability to provide housing for people that live and work in our community, especially things like teachers, first responders, nurses, things like that, that's the mainstay of our community. And we need to figure out how to be able to get people like that to be able to have ownership in the community that they contribute to, work in, and help shape. There's Ms. Harris. currently VP. So the U.S. housing market boomed during the years of the pandemic when prices peaked across much of the country amid high demand, historically low inventory, and relatively low mortgage rates. This is a story that we've heard time and time again. During the pandemic, interest rates went to rock bottom pricing, demand shot way up, and housing values went through the roof. The boom led to a crisis of affordability, which in turn triggered a slowdown in sales in late summer 2022, causing a temporary price correction across the housing market that ended in spring 2023, which is true. Late 2022 was very, very quiet when it came to real estate. Interest rates had just shot up. Temporary price correction. I think this is a little bit of a going out on a limb here. Did some areas see price corrections? Yes. But I mean, across most of the United States, prices held steady, and they still have to this day. And you have to remember, prices went up 15, 20, 25, 30% in a lot of areas. Just because they've receded 5% to 10%, well, they're still up a lot given the last 2 to 3 years. So I think, this causing a temporary price correction across the housing market, maybe in some markets it did, but to make that a blanket statement across the United States, I would not agree with. After the modest slide, home prices rose across the U.S. As of June, the latest data available on Redfin, the median sale price of a home was $442,451, up 4% compared to a year earlier, and higher than the May 2022 peak of $432,000. A chronic shortage of homes at the national level has contributed to keeping prices high, as the country has significantly underbuilt in the years following the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. And this paragraph right here is a huge, huge reason of why we're not anticipating a major housing crash or price reduction nationally anytime soon. After 2008, a lot of home builders, a lot of people, quite frankly, got their clocks cleaned financially, wiped out. And a lot of those home builders they went out of business. They never came back. We had a huge oversupply of homes, hence the crashing prices. And we never really rebounded from that. And from 2008 to about 2018 or 19, we were very far below average on building new units. And, we're all familiar with the law of averages. I mean, remember back to middle school or high school, if you had, a D throughout the first, 3 quarters of the year, well, it's really, really hard to get back up to a C or a B because you have to do, a lot of work in a short amount of time. And that's basically where we're at. We were so far below average for so long that it's going to take us many, many years of above average home building to even get back to that average baseline. And that's part of the reason you're seeing the huge, huge supply issues with housing. Now, again, in some areas, this has been improved. The housing supply has ticked up. We have a better number of home starts. We have a lot of builders building apartment buildings, which is a pro and a con, and that's for a different video. But nonetheless, housing is starting to be built, but we've got a long way to go. And that's why we just don't see a huge national price reduction. I'm sure there's some crash bros watching right now, some crash bros that will watch on the replay that will say, oh, credit card debt's at an all-time high, repos are going up, people can't afford things, which is all true. But it's fundamentally very, very, very difficult to have a housing crash when A, we don't have an overabundance of supply, and B, you have to remember that a huge majority of homeowners have a less than 4% interest rate, and many of them have a less than 3% interest rate. And something like 40% of all homes in the United States are paid off free and clear, so they don't have a mortgage to worry about anyway. So with stats like that, sorry, Crash Bros, I'm not with you. However, if you are a Crash Bro and you think it is going to crash, drop a comment. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. The new measures announced by the White House are in line with what the Biden-Harris administration has been doing in the past 2 years with the Housing Supply Action Plan, which sought to close the supply shortfall in the market in 5 years. Sounds great on paper. That's prime politician speak right there. There's no way that you're going to close the supply gap in housing in 5 years. Like I just said, we've been underbuilding for, at least, from 2008 to at least 2016, 2017. And there's no way that can be made up in 5 years. And not only were we underbuilding, but we were so far underbuilding that it's not going to happen. However, any little bit helps. So if the Housing Supply Action Plan were to increase inventory and purchasable houses, that would help. Keep in mind, the operative word there is purchasable houses. Building more units for rent, we do need rentals. Renters are an important part. They deserve affordable and stable housing as well. However, homeownership is the bedrock of the American dream. It's the bedrock of the American community. And quite frankly, we don't want to be a nation of renters because that will stymie the financial growth and progress of individual Americans and also individual neighborhoods and cities. Being a nation of renters is something that some very wealthy people out there would like your BlackRocks and your Wall Street funds and things like that. They would love to be able to build properties and then rent them back to us. That's one of the mainstays of robber barons and landlords in our nation. And while we do need rentals, we really need houses that are affordable for purchase by the average American. After decades of underinvesting in housing, we're finally seeing progress under President Biden and Vice President Harris. More units are under construction than at any time in over 50 years, and the rate of new housing starts is up 17% compared to the last administration. The White House wrote in a news release on Tuesday, the Biden-Harris housing plan would build over 2 million new homes to further increase supply and lower housing costs for Americans. So, again, all sounds good. Couple things here. So more units are under construction than at any time over the last 50 years. Well, that is good, but we haven't had a housing shortage up until about the last 10 years or so. So I'm not surprised that over the last 50 years, we've been building a lot. If you go back 50 years, puts us at the 50s, that would have been post-World War II, GI, boom, a lot of soldiers coming home from World War II, starting families, needing housing. So again, that's good, but it's not as huge of an accomplishment as we may think that it is. And the rate of new housing starts is up 17% compared to last administration. Again, the last administration ended in late 2020, and we didn't really have a housing supply problem until mid 2020. So not really the previous administration's fault for not building homes either. But again, any new inventory is good inventory. We certainly need it. So if this housing plan can increase inventory, then we should be all for it. Among the new measures, expediting housing permitting at the local and state level could be crucial. Permitting requirements contribute to the nationwide housing shortage, leading many would-be deals to not be financially viable or be scaled down and driving up the cost of housing, the White House wrote. Reforms to streamline permitting process can lead to more housing being built more quickly, which will lower housing costs. Yeah, this is true. Like I said in the beginning of the stream, there is a lot of red tape that goes around building houses. And a lot of times it's very, very expensive red tape. And this probably is not going to come as a shock to you guys watching out there, but builders and developers are very profit aware. And they're very sensitive to what the costs are, if a project will or won't pencil out. If it doesn't pencil out, they just simply won't do it. They won't build the project. So by lowering the barrier to entry, the permitting issues, the red tape, things like that, I think Ms. Harris is hoping that will stimulate more housing inventory and more housing starts and alleviate some of the issues. Now, I don't know how much of this Ms. Harris can do as if she were to become president. A lot of this comes down to local and state laws, which can be difficult for any president of the United States to affect. They could offer some federal tax incentives to not only home builders, but to also local municipalities. And maybe that could help them getting rid of some of this red tape, but that remains to be seen. The administration is also planning on speeding up historic preservation reviews for federal housing projects and enabling more housing types to be built under the HUD code. As a housing economist, I am excited to see ongoing housing policy announcements focused on supply during this election cycle. Ralph McLaughlin, Realtor.com's senior economist, said of the new measures, which I do agree with. It is important that we start talking about this because housing is a big problem in our nation right now. And it looks like it's probably going to remain that way for some time. The current announcement by the Biden-Harris administration is focused on supply, something that housing economists like myself have been fixated on for the past few decades, he added. It's promising to see such policies that target the underlying cause of much of today's housing troubles, a chronic undersupply of both market rate and affordable housing stock, which is true. It's very difficult. And still, even in my market, if a home pops up and it's under $700,000, it's going to sell very, very quickly because that's what is affordable now. Again, I'm in Southern California, so my market a little bit more expensive than the typical average American market. But man, if we could build some houses under the $400,000 price point, it would be hugely, hugely beneficial. At a recent rally in Atlanta, Harris mentioned the high cost of rent as a major housing issue she'd tackle if elected. It is true that by many indicators, our economy is the strongest in the world, but while inflation is down and wages are up, prices are still too high, Harris told a crowd gathered at the Georgia State University Convocation Center on July 30th. On day one, I will take on price gouging and bringing down costs. We will ban more of the hidden fees and surprise late charges that banks and other companies use to pad their profits. We'll take on corporate landlords and cap unfair rent increases, she continued. So, this is kind of interesting. Again, I think this is a little bit more political speak, which I don't think is a huge surprise. Obviously, she's trying to get elected to be president of the United States. So this is not something that's unique to Ms. Harris. In fact, I think every politician that tries to be elected engages in this. But yes, prices are high, but that's how the free market works. And I'll be very, very interested to see how she brings prices down. Really, the only true way to bring prices down is to either lower the demand, which I don't see that happening anytime soon because we continue to have more and more people every day as a nation, or raise supply up. And that is something that potentially could be a solution that the federal government could aid in. I do agree, corporate landlords, they're a problem. Again, I don't think we should have BlackRock and these corporate investors buying up entire housing tracts, taking over neighborhoods, purchasing things with all cash, cutting out the everyday homeowner. That is a problem. And I think she needs to do more than just cap unfair rent increases. I think the federal government probably needs to just take a completely different stance. However, do I think that's likely? No, because those same corporate landlords have very good connections at all levels of government, and they know how to grease the wheels appropriately. So I'd be surprised if it actually happened. Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, also plans to encourage the construction of more homes should he be elected in November. NBC News reported, citing a Trump campaign official, that the former president wants to lower housing costs by spurring construction of new homes on the periphery of cities and suburban areas where land is cheapest. The report added that he also plans to eliminate Biden's anti-suburban housing regulation, which, there's a little bit of a good thought there too. Land is one of the most expensive things when it comes to building, followed by labor. And so incentivizing builders to build in areas where land is a little bit more affordable could be helpful. But where land is more affordable typically is areas where it's less desirable by the consumer, hence it's more affordable. So there could be an issue here where former President Trump pushes this through, and if he does be elected as the next president, there could be an issue where he invests all this money and time into these houses that maybe people don't want, but the demand is so high that it would probably get gobbled up anyway. So that's the first article I wanted to go over. We have another article that we're going to get into. Before we get into that, again, if you guys have any questions or comments about that article, let me know. What do you think is going to happen with the presidential election? What do you think the presidential election could change about the housing market? Do you think one candidate is going to have a better plan or outcome than the other? Let me know in the comments below, and love to hear from you. So another really important piece to this whole housing being at the forefront of America is really the whole interest rate thing. And luckily, we have gotten a little bit of good news. I'm going to make this article a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see the text is kind of small on this one. There we go. That's a little bit better, I think. The interest rate thing is really, really critical to the housing market, and Americans are really, really sensitive to interest rates because that really has a huge effect on affordability. Again, we've talked about the lock-in effect. And for those that are maybe watching for the first time or just tuning in, the lock-in effect is when people own a house. Maybe they do want to move. Maybe they need a bigger house. Maybe they need a house in a different neighborhood. Maybe they need a smaller house. And they have a 3% interest rate that they got during the pandemic, and they simply just don't want to take on a 6.5% or 7% interest rate. That's the lock-in effect. They are locked in to that low interest rate. And with rates hoping to be cut and to go a little bit lower, it could ease that lock-in effect. Experts predict what the real estate market will look like once mortgage rates drop. And this came out on the 13th, so just a couple days ago. The high mortgage rates that have paralyzed America's housing market are falling and could nosedive further by the end of the year. Rates for a 30-year fixed mortgage plunged to 6.47%, the lowest in over a year, for the week ending August 8th, according to Freddie Mac. And with inflation losing steam and the economy cooling, expectations are high the Federal Reserve could make not just one, but 2 rate cuts by the end of this year, which I think is probably likely. The economy is trending in a good direction in terms of signaling that it could lend itself to an interest rate cut. Again, whenever we talk about interest rates, whenever we talk about the Fed, I always like to tell people, the Fed's got a really, really difficult job. Jerome Powell has a really, really hard job trying to, orchestrate the American economy so that, it doesn't have a major crash, major inflation, major disinflation. It's walking a very, very, very fine line. But economic news is trending in a good way for interest rate cuts. So we're going to talk about, what the real estate market will look like if those interest rates do get cut, because there are pros and there are cons. As a result, Realtor.com senior economist Ralph McLaughlin expects mortgage rates to drop further in September and December, which is encouraging news for potential home buyers who have been waiting to participate in the market, which is common. That might be you right now watching this live stream. You might be someone who's considered buying a home or getting in the market, but you just, you look at the prices, you look at the rates, you look at the monthly payment, you go, this is just too much. And, a little bit of a rate change can make a big difference because this is over the course of 30 years. So even just 0.5 to 1% can make a huge difference on the home that you can afford and what your monthly payment will be. So for those home buyers that, potentially kind of sitting on the fence, maybe entertaining the idea of buying a home, well, these hopefully 2 rate cuts could, hopefully, put you into the home buying category. This is also encouraging news for homeowners who might be thinking of selling. Is it time to finally list their property on the market? And if they do, what should they expect? To help shed some light on what's coming down the pike for home sellers, here's what real estate experts predict will happen to the housing market once rates take the plunge. The lock-in effect, which is what we just talked about, will ease and homeowners will start selling. This is great news. Again, we need to increase supply of available homes for purchase. There's only 2 ways to do that. Number 1, build more, which is very difficult. It takes a long time. And number 2, get more homes on the market for sale, which is a little bit easier, could happen a little bit quicker, but you can't make people sell their house, right? You can make it a little bit easier for developers to develop housing, but you can't make people sell their house, but you can entice them by lowering the interest rate. As interest rates become lower, the lock-in effect will not be as prominent, and people will feel a little bit more okay and perhaps a little bit more open-minded about selling their house, losing their 3 or 3.5% interest rate, and getting a 6% interest rate because it's a home that they need. A recent Realtor.com analysis found that 86% of homeowners have mortgage rates below 6%. Understandably, many feel locked in, unwilling to trade in their low rate for today's higher ones if they sell and buy again. Homeowners have been sitting on the sidelines, not wanting to give up their COVID era interest rates, says Tan Tunador, vice president and senior loan officer of Atlantic Coast Mortgage, i.e. the lock-in effect. But once rates drop further, that could change. The faster rates drop, the less homeowners will be held in place, and we could see both new inventory and more home sales, says Danielle Hall, chief economist of Realtor.com. There are significant number of sellers that couldn't stomach, right or wrong, going from a 4% rate to a 7.5% rate, says Mason Whitehead, a Dallas-based branch manager for Churchill Mortgage. But they can stomach going from 4% to something like in the 5% to 6% range, which is true. I mean, I actually did that very same thing. I purchased a house, thankfully, luckily, right before the pandemic. I purchased a house the very end of September of 2019. I refied that the mortgage that I had during the COVID era, and I think I had like a 2.89 or something, 2.85 rate. And my wife and I were very happy in the house. We had no intention or plans of moving. And then in 2022, actually in about May of 2022, house came on the market that both my wife and I really, really loved. We could envision it being our forever home. It's a home that was going to last us for a very long time. It was in a great part of the city that we loved. And so we decided to go for it. And we ended up getting a 5.25% interest rate. And when we thought about it, we thought, yeah, we really love having this sub 3% rate, but does that make up for a house that we can, live in for the next 20 or 30 years? Does that make up for the equity that we could gain in this new house over 20 or 30 years? And we decided to pull the trigger and go for it. And quite honestly, we're very happy that we did. So the lock-in effect is real, but if we can get these rates down to sub 6, I think you're going to start to see people at least toy with the idea and maybe be able to stomach the idea of going, hey, you know what? I know we've got 3.5%, but we really need a bigger house. We've had another child or two since we've bought this one. We really would like to get out of this area of the neighborhood and get in this a more quiet area of the neighborhood. Or, hey, 2 kids went off to college, and 6 years ago we needed the big house. Now we don't, and that can make a big difference on the available inventory that we have on the market. More home buyers will enter the market. In the same vein that sellers have felt frozen in place, buyers have felt iced out of the market. But if mortgage rates continue to decline, then experts predict more home buyers who've been on the sidelines finally jump into the market. When rates drop, I think you will see pent-up demand hit the market again, says Whitehead, which this is a very, very common belief and theory amongst a lot of real estate professionals. If rates do drop, which looks like they're going to, it could certainly spark a lot of buyers coming in off the sidelines. And if we don't have that increase in sellers willing to sell, it could generate competition again. And what happens when you have competition for homes? Well, competition for any product or asset, the price typically goes up. Some buyers, like sellers, shelved their house hunt because they felt the payment was too high, but a lower rate makes home shopping more affordable. For some that didn't qualify at 7.5%, they will qualify at 6%, says Whitehead. And again, for people that aren't familiar with mortgages or housing, you might think, oh, what's the big difference between 7.5 and 6? It's 1.5%. That's a huge difference. That's a huge, huge difference. It's probably going to equate to hundreds of dollars per month, if not close to $1,000, of course, depending on the mortgage amount that you are obtaining. But that's a 1.5% is huge. And quite certainly 7.5% could put someone out of the realm of affordability for a home, whereas 6% could bring them back into that realm of affordability. So you have more people able to buy as well. In other words, once rates fall, the market will see both more sellers willing to sell and buyers willing to buy, which I actually personally think is the most correct outcome. Now, again, will any future president have the ability to make a big difference or change on the situation? Probably not. Ms. Harris can talk about, I'm going to shake up the market, and I'm going to make it so much easier to build homes. But again, building homes takes a long time, and we would have to build homes in a lot of different markets all over the nation, not just in one certain area. And you have different state laws, different county laws, different city laws that all would have to be affected by the president. So I don't know if that's going to happen. However, interest rates can be that thing that does open up more buyers and more sellers. And that's not something that the government can control. That is controlled by the Fed. Sales will come on fast and strong. Any seller thinking of listing would be wise to start prepping now. Very good advice. Mortgage rates have been improving. They are bringing potential buyers out early, many of whom gave up on buying either because of the low housing inventory or the higher rate environment that the past few years. Says Tonador, for sellers, listing their house early may give them the opportunity to sell before their competition hits the market. Other experts agree there are definitely signs home buying activity is beginning to bounce off the mat. So this is absolutely true. If you are thinking about selling your home, now is a good time to maybe start prepping the property for what you think you might need to do. Maybe start looking into some local real estate agents to see what your house might be worth. You might want to cruise Redfin and Zillow to see what's available in your neighborhood and at what price point. That'll give you some idea. Because what's going to happen is when interest rates do go down, we probably will see a flood of people go, okay, I will sell my house because I think this is going to engage more buyers. And now I want to be a buyer. And in order for me to be a buyer, I need to sell first. Well, if you're someone who's thinking about selling and you can get an early jump on it before your competition does, you are still going to be the fortunate beneficiary of a market where interest rates have come down a little bit. Buyers are a little bit more enticed. Inventory is still tight, which means that if you do have an available house that's priced right, that's presented well, it's probably going to sell really quickly. If you wait too long, we're going to get a decent increase in sellers wanting to sell their home, and then your property won't look as special, it won't be as coveted, and there will just be more choices for buyers out there. So something to consider if you're on the fence about selling. If you are thinking about selling, you definitely want to engage the help of a local realtor to understand the market trends in your area, the local laws and customs in regards to selling real estate, and most importantly, in order to get a good, accurate idea of what your home is worth, it really takes the interpretation of a professional to be able to weigh comps, look at your property condition, things like that to give you a good idea of what your home may be worth. If you are looking for a trusted real estate professional in your area, drop me a comment. I have a huge network all over the nation of really, really good, trusted, true professional real estate agents that can help you. So if you're looking for a good qualified agent, let me know. Certainly happy to help you with that. Mortgage applications have perked up, and refinancing activity also looks to be picking up as rates go lower and owners carrying elevated mortgage rates seek to reduce their monthly payments, says Charlie Doherty, director and senior economist at Wells Fargo. So that right there, mortgage applications have perked up. That right there, and that's just from Wells Fargo. So right, a major bank saying, hey, we're seeing an uptick in mortgage applications, which means people applying for a loan, wanting to go through that pre-approval process, start the house hunting process. That's great. So if you are thinking of selling, the proof is in the pudding, right? Mortgage applications have perked up. And I think that's only going to continue, especially if the Fed actually does go through with cutting rates once or maybe even twice. All told, mortgage applications remain low, but the recent upturn is a promising sign that buying activity is starting to heat up and defrost a housing market frozen by higher interest rates, adds Doherty. And this is true. We've had for now a long time, since about mid-2022, and now here we are mid-2024, for 2 years, everybody kind of just went, wait, hold on. Let's calm down on buying and selling. Let's maybe think twice about what we're doing because it's really expensive. Rates are high, inventory is low. I have to battle against 15, 20, 25 other offers. That's just not something that I want to do. And there's only so long that buyers and sellers can hold out from purchasing property. Rents are going to continue to go up. It's going to continue to be more and more expensive to rent if you are someone who's contemplating buying. Sellers can only hold out for so long before they have to have the bigger house, before they need a smaller house, before someone passes away and the house has to be sold because it's going to get passed on to the kids or the trust or whatever, whatever may the situation may be. There's always life events, and you can't just not sell forever. So I think as they very well put, the housing market has been frozen by high interest rates and low inventory, and it looks like that's starting to defrost now. And we'll just have to see kind of what happens with that. Greg's got a comment. Let's see what Greg has to say. Trump will open up the oil spigot, increase company investment by reduced taxes, increase buyer sentiment. Kamala does not know a thing about anything but criminal prosecution. People need hope. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate that comment. And hey, thanks for keeping the political talk clean. I appreciate what you're saying about Trump. Obviously, Trump a little bit more business oriented, Kamala a little bit more political oriented. We'll see. It'll certainly be interesting to see what either candidate does with the housing market, because I guarantee you it's going to be something that they're going to have to talk about. It's definitely going to be something that they have to address. Greg, thanks for the comment and thanks for being here. I appreciate you. When mortgage rates stay in a sub 6.5% average, we will really see the housing inventory increase and sale activity boom, says Tunendor, which I do believe. And we're already starting to see that. We're starting to see 6.5% on the low end right now. And the general consensus is, man, if we ever see rates start with a 5, go to 5.99, 5.90, 5.80, I really think that the real estate market's going to open up a lot. And I think it's going to be good for both parties. I think, it's going to be good for buyers and sellers. I think it's going to motivate sellers that are facing the lock-in effect to sell. It's also going to help the people that bought during the 2022 to 2024 time frame when they maybe did have a 7.5% rate. Man, if you have a 7.5% rate and you can refi that bad boy down to 5 and at 5.9%, that's going to make a huge difference on your monthly payment. And that's going to keep more money in your pocket. And that's going to make you feel a little bit more financially secure. So boy, if we could ever get those rates back down to the low 6s or even high 5s, hold on to your hats, everyone, because I think it's going to go crazy. Home prices will likely remain high. The good news for sellers is that even as the market gets moving, home prices are expected to remain high or dip only slightly. And I think that's really going to have a huge dependency on where. Real estate is hyper local, and we're examining this from like 10,000 feet. This is a pretty big overview of housing, and we're just talking general, national housing news. But it's really important to remember that your local area is unique. Your local neighborhood is unique, and just because what's happening in your neighborhood, town, city, or even county might not be happening in the county next door. It could be vastly different, let alone the state next door. So, the whole, home prices are expected to remain high or dip only slightly. It could vary depending on where you are. Sellers will continue to be in a historically strong position as the U.S. housing market is still short millions of homes. See what we're talking about? We still have a huge supply deficit. Assuming there isn't a severe recession, we will likely see only modest price decreases in most markets in 2024. Hey, that's not a problem. I'm a real estate agent. Everybody thinks that I just want prices to keep going up, and it makes my checks bigger. Actually, what I want buyers to get a break, and they haven't gotten a break since 2020. And I think it would be really beneficial if home prices did see a little bit of a dip. If home prices dipped a little bit and interest rates went down, that would be a huge relief to a ton of Americans out there that want to buy homes. And I know what you're thinking. You're going, Joe, what you just said makes no sense. Why would interest rates go down and home prices go down? Usually it's opposite, right? When interest rates go down, typically home prices go up. When home prices go down, interest rates typically will tick up. But we saw this theory blown to smithereens over the last couple of years, right? Interest rates went up over the last few years and home prices continue to go up. So who's to say that both those things can't come down? Is it unlikely? Yes. Do I think it's going to be a substantial price decrease and rate decrease? No, I don't. I think we're going to get a substantial rate decrease. I think we'll get a very, very minor price decrease, maybe a few percent depending on the area. I don't think prices are going to decrease in your major metropolitan and urban areas. I don't think Miami's going to see a price decrease. I don't think New York will. I don't think much of the Northeast will. I don't think the West Coast will. And I don't think some of your Midwest states will. In fact, Columbus, Ohio is like going crazy right now. Huge gains, huge appreciation in pricing because it's in a super affordable pocket. So I think that area, sort of upper Midwest area, is also not right for any type of price declines. But I think other areas of Florida, the South, certainly Texas, could certainly see prices decline. And like I said, if prices go down and interest rates go down, congratulations, home buyers and sellers, because it's going to mean that things are going to open up, loosen up, and we're going to have more transaction turnover. However, Mr. Dan here says that formerly hot markets like Denver, Austin, Texas, and Phoenix may see more significant drop in housing prices as smaller investor money sits on the sidelines for most of 2024. But in general, experts don't see home prices taking a major dive as interest rates start to descend. Even so, it will be smart for sellers not to get too cocky with their home pricing. This is incredibly important. We're seeing that even now in our market where there's not a lot of inventory. My mic was muted. Sorry about that. So yes, if properties are presented well, if they're priced accordingly, they're still going to sell very, very quickly. I'll give you an example. My firm just listed a luxury home in the north part of our city. It's an estate neighborhood, so large homes, big lot, fancy homes for rich people. It's a $2 million home, gorgeous 1931 kind of English style home on just a little less than an acre for a lot, which is really big in our area. It's a huge lot in our area. And you think who out there right now is looking to buy a $2 million home? Well, there was multiple offers. It's sold in like a week and it's going to sell for over the asking price. So the demand is still there, assuming you price the home properly and you present it well. Sellers may benefit from realistic pricing and encouraging buyer competition, says Cassandra Happ, an analyst for Wallet Hub. Working with a real estate agent to price strategically and enhancing online presence with 3D tours can maximize the chances of a quick and profitable sale. That's basically what I was just talking about. In other words, sellers shouldn't set their hopes priced too high, lest they price themselves out of the market, which routinely happens. A lot of times sellers take this idea, I want to price it really high. I can always negotiate down. What happens when you do that? You price it too high. Buyers get turned off. They go, oh, I'm never going to pay that much. Like that's not a good deal. I'm not interested in overpaying for this house in an already expensive market. In reality, if you price your house correctly and reasonably and realistically, you might get 2 or 3 or 4 people to go, hey, that house is priced pretty good. That's in line with what I think it should be priced at. And, I like that house. I've been trying to get in that neighborhood for a while. I think I will write an offer. And then all of a sudden you have 3, 4, 5 people looking to write an offer on the property. You have a bidding war and the price actually goes up, sells for more than what you even priced it at. Housing affordability will likely remain strained given still high mortgage rates and the rapid run up in home prices over the past 3 years, says Doherty. A shaky economy could keep the pace of home sales relatively tepid. The economy, we're still kind of we got some news 2 weeks ago that, unemployment was up and we had some issues with, potential layoffs and the stock market took a dip. And then like 3 days later, the stock market recovered and we got some other job related data that looked actually okay. At the end of the day, you can't base what you do in terms of buying or selling a home based on the economy. You just need to figure out, is it the right time for you? Is it the right thing for you? Is a good time to move? Is it a good time to sell your house? Can you afford the house that you're looking to buy? That is all up to you. Multiple offers may make a comeback. The increasing competition among buyers might mean that sellers once again find themselves in the enviable position of being able to choose from several offers for their homes, which, if you're a seller, is a great position to be in. Not only do you typically get a higher price for your house, but you also can be more strict on your terms, right? So you can tell buyers that, hey, instead of 14 days student inspection, you got to do it in 7 days. And instead of 10 days to get your loan sorted out, I'm only going to give you 7 days. Or, hey, if you haven't been fully approved for the loan yet, I'm not even going to entertain it. I only want to entertain offers from people that have been not just pre-approved, but fully approved for a loan. And when you have multiple offers, you have a little bit more leverage to ask for those types of things from the prospective buyers. Sellers will be in luck when mortgage rates start to drop. They'll have multiple offers to consider and have some extra leverage when negotiating, predicts Bryson Taggart, Senior Agent Partnership Manager for Opendoor. For example, sellers receiving multiple offers can drive up the price of their home or waive contingencies for an easier close and a more convenient timeline. Just like I was talking about. Still, sellers need to remember that the highest offer isn't always the best, which is true. I advise sellers to evaluate offer terms holistically and select the one that aligns best with their needs, their wants and needs, says Taggart. And that's something that your real estate agent will help guide you through. A lot of people think, oh, highest and best offer, that's the highest offer, that's the best one. Not necessarily. A real estate agent can help guide you through the process of vetting multiple offers. It's actually not as easy as it sounds. It's not as easy just going with the one with the most money. There's a lot of things that go into it. There's a lot of little details. There's a lot of minutia that, quite frankly, can make a big difference in the success and experience that you have as a home seller, right? Because as a home seller, you're putting a lot of trust and faith in this buyer and the buyer's agent to have a good sale, have a good transaction. And if you're a home seller and you're selling your home in order to buy a new home, you really need that transaction to go smoothly. Because if you're contingent on selling your home to buy the next one, and if something happens with your current transaction, it gets delayed, that could affect your new house and your new living situation, which is not a good thing. For some, that could be an offer from a more qualified buyer or a cash buyer, which provides less of a risk for fall throughs. If a seller is planning to also purchase a home, they should pick a buyer with favorable terms for an efficient close, of course. So that's just what some things might look like with these given interest rates. What do you guys think? Do you think we are in line to see the Fed cut rates? Obviously, nobody knows for sure. It looks likely, but what do you think? If you're on the fence about buying home, would a rate cut help get you off the fence? If rates did get cut by 0.5%, would you be back in the buying game? Sellers, would you think about maybe upsizing, downsizing, relocating based on rates going down, maybe alleviating that lock-in effect? Drop a comment, let me know. So the last thing that we're going to go over is a video. And I don't know if you guys have all heard in the news recently that there's going to be a big shakeup in the way that real estate agents work, specifically two things. It's relating to commission and how agents get paid, first thing. And number two, it relates to how people visit homes and go tour homes. So I'll start with the simple one first, which is touring a home. Currently, well, actually, it's changing in about 2 days, but up until about a month ago, if you wanted to go tour a home, you could call up an agent and say, hey, Joe, I see you're a local real estate agent in the Claremont, California area. I want to go see this home that's listed in your city. Can you make an appointment? Show me the house. Absolutely. No problem. Be happy to help you with that. Boom, make the appointment, go on a tour and show them the house. Well, now that's changing a little bit. Now, in order for that same thing to take place, and this is a national thing. This isn't just state. This isn't just, some realtors. This is any realtor involved with the National Association of Realtors, which is most, will have to abide by this rule change. Now, if you want to view a home, you call me up and say, hey, Joe, I see you have a home for sale in Claremont, California. The new rule will be that before I can show you that home in person, we have to sign a buyer representation agreement. There's all different ways that this agreement could look. It could just be for that one home. It could be for a set amount of time. It could be for just a certain city or county. There's a lot of things that go into it. But the bottom line is that now moving forward, when you engage an agent to show you a property, there's an extremely high likelihood that they are going to need to abide by this rule that the National Association of Realtors that is set in accordance with the Department of Justice that says, hey, you have to have a buyer's representation agreement. That agreement needs to state what the expectations are of the agent and what the expectations are of the relationship. And it will also need to stipulate how the agent will be compensated and what that will look like, which falls on the other portion of this new rule shakeup. Essentially, what's happening now is in the past, when a seller listed their home, an agent would come in and say, hey, Mr. Seller, this is what I think your home is worth. We can get on the market quick. I know I can do a great job. The seller goes, great. You know what? I'll hire you. Let's sign this contract for you to list my home. And let's get it on the market. Okay, wonderful. Listing agent. Well, my fee to sell the home is X percent. Typically it was between 4 and 6%, but commissions have always been negotiable. There's been no set standard. There's been no agreed upon rate in the industry. That's never been a thing. But standard is usually between 4 and 6%, but it can range anywhere from 2 to 10%. Let's just take 5% because it's a nice round number. So the seller says, hey, okay, Mr. Agent, you want to charge 5%? The agent says, yes, I'm going to charge 5% to sell your home, but I am going to share that money with the agent that brings the buyer. This way we can entice good agents to bring their clients that have good buyers, and we can sell your home quickly for top dollar. That is no more. That is no more. So that's not going to happen anymore. The way it's going to work now is that the offer of compensation from a seller to a buyer's agent cannot be displayed in the MLS. So before agents go in the MLS and see, oh, this person's offering to pay X percent or X amount of dollars. That's not happening anymore. That field has now been removed from the MLS. A lot of sellers think this means, oh, hey, I don't have to pay a buyer's agent. Well, yes and no. You never had to pay a buyer's agent before. You didn't have to offer a set amount of compensation. In fact, I've seen several listings in the MLS over the years that said, hey, I'll pay the buyer's agent $1, which is effectively zero. So you never, as a seller, you never had to pay the buyer's agent before, but it was customary for the listing agent to negotiate a fee and then give some of that fee to the buyer's agent. So that's changing. Now what will happen is that buyers will have to have an agreement with their buyer's agent, again, before they even see a property, that will state specifically how much they're to be paid and how. Most of the time, most buyers, especially in an era where we have such low affordability with homes, most of the time, most buyers will say, I don't have the money to come out of pocket for the agent's fee. Sorry, Mr. Real Estate Agent, I would love for you to work for me, but I can't come up with the down payment, with the closing costs, with moving costs, and now I have to pay the buyer's agent. So what do I do? Well, now what's going to happen is buyers are going to request directly from the seller to either pay their agent directly, the buyer's agent directly, or give them concessions so that the concessions will go from the seller to the buyer, and the buyer can then pay their agent. So that's kind of it in like a 5-minute breakdown. There's a lot more that goes into it. If you guys have specific questions, put them into the chat. I'm going to play this little short video from the Today Show, which was okay in explaining things. But as I'm playing this, if you guys have questions about this, ask me, let me know. I'd be happy to give you my opinion and try to answer your question as best I can. So let's get into this video.
How do you know all this? What are you, some kind of real estate agent?
Oh, he's a realtor. There is a difference somehow.
Somehow. We're back to the clip from Modern Family, setting us up for today's consumer.
By the way, that show never gets old.
Never.
There's some new rules that are about to kick in, rules that are going to change the real estate landscape for both buyers and sellers, and they could potentially mean thousands of dollars in savings.
And
by the way, these rules are kicking in officially August 17th in 2 days. However, a lot of local realtor boards, MLSs, organizations have already, this has already gone into effect. But officially, according to the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice, The magic date is August 17th.
NBC's business correspondent Brian Chung is here with everything we need to know. So all of this is happening. This big change is coming, and this has to do with commissions, and somehow we're going to save money.
Yeah, so this follows a big settlement from the National Association of Realtors earlier in the spring. The bottom line here is that it's going to give home sellers a lot more transparency and negotiating power into the fees that they pay when they sell their home.
That's kind of interesting because I don't know if it's going to give them a lot more. Fees have always been negotiable. You know, if you're sitting in your house and you have an agent sitting in front of you and they say, and you go, oh, all this looks great. I'm ready to sign a contract, but first we got to talk about fees. And that agent goes, well, I only work for 5%. I only do work for 5%. Well, as the homeowner, you could say, okay, well, that's nice, but I only want to pay you 4%. And the agent can try to, demonstrate their value and show to you why they're worth 5% or 6% or whatever they say that they're worth. But you as a homeowner have always had the ability to sit there and say, no, I'm not going to pay that. And if you don't want to do it for this much, I will find an agent that does want to do it for this much. So something just to, consider. I don't see how this is going to give sellers more negotiating power. I don't see that at all.
Home. So if we just back up, basically, if you sold your home, you might be familiar with the maybe 5 to 6% commission that you'll pay for that. Well, usually the way that works is that the agent for the seller is going to split that 5 to 6% bounty with the agent of the buyer that ultimately buys the home. Well, now they're going to have to be more upfront about how those fees are negotiated, which means if you're a home seller, you might be able to say, you know what? I don't really want to work with this agent unless I can get maybe a 4 or 5% commission, which is one reason why agents are telling us and experts are telling us, well, this could in some cases lower the fees that sellers.
Right. But that's always been the case. Like what I just said, consumers have always had the ability to say, oh, I want you to do it for 4%, not 6%. They've always had that ability. So that's nothing new. And the fact that this segment is kind of hammering home on that, they're kind of missing the mark on that. They should be talking about some of the other things, which they do get into at a certain point.
Will pay. And again, this takes effect beginning on Saturday.
So if you're a home seller, how much potentially could you save? And if you're a home buyer, how much potentially could you save?
Yeah, Craig, this could be thousands of dollars. So if we do the math here, I am the data correspondent after all, right? If you're going to sell a home that's $300,000 and you're going to pay a 6% commission on that, well, that'd be $18,000. But if you're able to negotiate, let's say, for example, a 3% fee, well, then that would go down to $9,000. That'd be a $9,000 savings, again, if you're able to negotiate that. And again, that could be some real savings for those that are trying to sell into this pretty difficult market.
So then let's look at the bigger picture. Then what does that mean for the housing market overall?
Yeah, well, when we talk about the housing market, first off, buyers are going to have to be aware of this change as well, because in some cases, maybe the seller says, I want the buyer to be on the hook. So they're going to see some paperwork in some cases from their agent just to even see a house that's upfront about saying, all right, here's how much you could be on the hook for, if any, when it comes to.
So he's saying that some buyers will now have to be on the hook to pay their own agent, which is true. And what he's kind of glossed over really quickly was he was saying essentially that, hey, some agents might tell their buyers, hey, this is how much here's the home. This is what you want to see. But if you want to buy the home, this is how much that you're going to have to be on the hook to pay me, because this seller is not going to pay a commission. I'm going to tell you the effects that's going to have after this video concludes.
These fees. But in this market right now, it's still pretty much a cold market, right? High mortgage rates have been the big story. But the good news, mortgage rates have also come down. It was something around 7.8% just as recently as October. Now in August 2024, 6.5%. Okay. Again, it's not 3%, but that's a substantial decline from that, which could mean this combined with maybe lower commission fees. Yeah. Might be a good time to sell a house.
I'm sure real estate agents aren't happy about this whole thing.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Yeah, well, look, when it comes to kind of the fallout from all of this, it does certainly seem that on the buyer's agent side, it's going to be a little bit rough because, again, they're going to have to ask people just to even see a house that you got to sign all this paperwork if your state doesn't already require that right now. But on the buyer's or on the seller's agent side, they're saying, look, we're still going to work and offer services that will try to justify a 6% fee. But again, it gives a little bit more negotiating power to the seller to decide how much they pay.
Let's end where we started. Does Brian Chung know the difference between a real estate agent and a realtor?
They both have REAL in them.
Yeah, and there is a difference. A realtor is one that works for the National Association of Realtors, not works for, but is a part of the National Association of Realtors. A real estate agent is just someone who has a real estate license. So a little bit difference there. So I'm going to explain, really briefly, kind of what the implication and what this effect will be. So like he was saying, oh yeah, you might save some money on commission. Well, you could, but imagine if you're a home seller, right? And you want to sell your home and you say, hey, I heard that I no longer have to pay a buyer's agent commission. I heard that buyers will pay their agent directly. So instead of me paying like a 6% commission, I'll just pay 3% to the listing agent and I'll be good to go. Well, yeah, you could do that. But in an era and a time where affordability is so terrible, like I said earlier, many home buyers do not have the funds. I mean, if you're a home buyer on the stream right now, chime in. Would you have enough money for down payment, closing costs, moving costs, and to pay a buyer's agent representation fees? Probably not. Not many buyers have the ability to do that. So if you're a home seller and you say, hey, buyers and buyer's agents, figure it out. My home's for sale. Here it is. I'm going to pay my agent, but you got to pay yours. Well, as an agent that may represent a buyer, I'm going to tell that buyer, hey, guess what? You and I have an agreement, and I know that you're going to pay me X%. If we can get the seller to cover that, great, you don't have to pay for it. But this specific house, the seller has already said they're not going to cover the fee. So you are going, as the buyer, you're going to have to pay me out of your pocket if you want to buy this house. Or we could go see this house where the seller is open to paying my fee. Which one would you like to look at? Now, that buyer might say, I want to see both. Great, take them to go see both. But that buyer might also go, you know what? I'm not even going to look at this house because I can't afford it. That house actually is $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 more expensive than it really says, because I know I'm going to have to pay my agent. Whereas this house over here has already said, hey, we'll work with you. The seller will work with you. We'll provide you some concessions. We'll help you out with the fees. So that way you can afford to buy this house. Guess what's going to happen with that house? That house is going to receive much more interest from prospective buyers. That house is going to receive many more offers. It's going to receive more eyeballs on it. It's just going to receive more general interest from agents and consumers alike. Guess what happens when you have two similar products, but one incentivizes the consumer over the other? Well, that product is going to be much more desirable. And what's going to end up ultimately happening, in my opinion, with this commission thing, is that the houses that do not offer to at least pay some portion or some fee to either the buyer's concessions or the buyer's agent directly are probably going to not sell as quickly or for as much money. Of course, I could certainly be wrong. I have no idea. We're not even, we're 2 days out from implementing this thing across the nation. But at the end of the day, put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. And if you sell your home and you think, I don't have to pay 6%, I don't have to pay 5%, I'm just going to pay 3%. Okay, great. You pay the 3%, you sell the home, right? Well, when you sell your home, you're going to need to buy another home. Most likely. Most people don't buy a home and then just go rent an apartment. Most people sell a home to go buy a home somewhere else. They sell a home to go buy a bigger home. They sell a home to go buy a smaller home, whatever the reason may be, right? Well, when you sell that home, you might get out of paying the buyer's agent commission. But when you go to buy a home, you're going to have to pay your agent. So you can either pay let's just say 5% when you sell your home to your agent and to the buyer's agent, or you could pay 2.5% to your listing agent, sell your house, and then when you buy the house, pay 2.5% to your buyer's agent. How much commission did you pay in total? Very simple rudimentary math. You still paid 5%, right? So I don't think that this is going to have a huge impact on saving consumers a lot of money. It might save some consumers some money, but at the end of the day, commissions have always been negotiable. Buyers don't have any spare extra money to pay out of their own pocket. By the way, the buyer is the one that's bringing all the money to the closing table anyway. It's because of their down payment and their mortgage that the sellers even have the ability to pay for the agents. So really, without the buyer and the buyer's money, the whole thing is a moot point. And ultimately, I think that this will just change the way that things work, but not necessarily change what really actually happens with home prices. I don't think it's going to bring home prices down. I don't think it's going to bring home costs down. I don't think any of that's going to happen. So again, super kind of complicated issue. There's a lot of moving parts. This is a brand new implementation that we haven't done yet. So it's very interesting to see how all this plays out and shakes out. Of course, we'll just have to see sort of what happens with it. We'll just kind of see where it goes and what implications it does have. If you guys have questions about this specific topic, drop it in the comments. I'm happy to give you, my 2 cents and my advice and answer your question as best as possible. And I want to thank everybody for watching. This was a great stream. We had great viewership tonight. I really, really hope you enjoyed the stream. If you did enjoy the stream, drop a comment below. Just say, hey, Joe, like the stream, keep them coming. If you could drop a like on the stream, it also really helps out the channel. It helps out my stream. It helps me grow. And if you really enjoyed the content, you can consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell icon to get all the notifications when I do go live or post a video. It doesn't cost any money. It's completely free. And it would really mean a lot to me if you could drop a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back next Wednesday with another live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, have a great rest of your week. I'll see you next time. Bye.